Good evening, everybody. This is your host, Huge Pop, and Rudy Boy Gonzalez of the Huge Pop Entertainment. Tonight, our guest, his career spans 6 decades. He's known as the industry's Renaissance man. He's excelled as a ring veteran, renowned trainer, broadcaster, and promoter. Please welcome to the show, Les Thatcher. How you doing, my guy?
I'm doing great, man, and happy to be in Texas with you guys, especially that other guy that's on the show with us tonight.
Yeah,
He's like my adopted son, for Christ's sake.
so it's like a family reunion.
I can hear you now.
So, how you doing tonight, mate? Les, how you doing up there in what Knoxville, Kentucky?
Knoxville, Tennessee.
Okay. All right. Knoxville,
Yeah.
Tennessee. All right.
I'm cold. How
yeah.
are you guys down there?
Warm. I'm warm. I'm all right. So I'm going to go way back because one of my first questions I'd love to ask everybody is, what was it like as a kid growing up, a fan of the wrestling business? Who did you like watching? What were you excited about it?
I was 9 years old when I saw my first wrestling show at a neighbor's little 10-inch black and white screen. And I was fascinated. And so my mother, my father, and I, all three became fans at that point. And you're talking about the old guys. The guy that was my childhood idol happened to be, I found out after I got smart to the business, I couldn't have picked a better idol, was Buddy Rogers.
Okay.
So,
well, John Saxon, I don't know if you know the name. John Saxon says, I see my old man is on the show.
Don who?
John Saxon?
No, I don't believe I've ever heard of the name. I don't think.
All right. I'm just saying, I'm reading the comments, man. I'm just reading the comments. I mean, So, Buddy Rogers, huh?
Yeah. Well, like I say, and then once I got smart to the business, I realized I couldn't have picked a better idol, for God's sakes.
100%, yeah.
One of the great workers of all time. But, of all the stars from back in the 50s and that I saw walk down, come down the aisle from the dressing room, Rogers just had something special. The way he carried himself, the look. I was fascinated by the guy. When I was 10 years old, I wanted my mother to bleach my hair.
Okay.
And she said, absolutely not. And of course, looking back, I realized back then, I'd have been a fight on schoolyard every damn day. So she did me a favor. But blonde-headed 10-year-old kids just weren't happening back in that time.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Rudy, man, you got anything for our guest?
No, man, I'm gonna be just like you and just listen and I mean, I'll share this story. A few years ago, maybe 10, I don't remember. It's been a while. Me and Les did a clinic up in New Jersey, and they had about 60 kids there. They had 2 rings and 60 kids. And so we divided them up and stuff. And there were these 2 kids in the ring that were just having a hard time getting what we were trying to explain to them. And I mean, we were there for 5 minutes. I don't know. I don't remember what it was, but finally I got in the ring and I'm like, look, guys. And then Les is right behind me, and I'm like, oh shit, and so I tried explaining, Les tried explaining, and they still had no clue. I mean, they weren't getting it. So Les says, you know what? And I'm in my, I'm in my young mid-50s, and Les is up there in his 80s or so. So
wait a minute now, hold on.
Whoa.
Don't make me ancient, for God's sake.
So Les said, you know what? Let's just show them. And I said, okay. So there were 60 kids in that gym, and everybody's doing something. We had about 15 or so around the ring watching what we were doing. And there are some kids on the wrestling mat doing, some drills. There's some other kids in the other ring, and some were just standing around and what have you. There was a lot of activity going on. And so I think what it was Les put me in a headlock. I threw him in the ropes. He came back, gave me a tackle. I took a bump, and when I sat up, the place was quiet. And I looked around, and everybody's looking at us, and that's all we did. All it was a headlock, and I shot him in the ropes. He gave me a tackle. I took a bump, and we had the whole place in the palm of our hands. And they were just like, "Oh wow, holy cow, And we're trying to explain to them that's how the fans react, you know. And I think what it was the kids just couldn't they weren't understanding the timing of the bump and the headlock because I don't. They were just basically rushing through the deal. And on a side note, when I was breaking in, I always heard of a guy named Les Thornton, and I heard of Les Thatcher. And for some reason, I was mixed them up. And so when I found out that I was doing this clinic with Les Thatcher, I said, okay, I looked him up and stuff and on Google and all that, and wanted to make sure I had the right guy. I didn't want to say, hey, Les, I remember when you were the British champion or something stupid. And we just connected, and getting in the ring with Les was like a privilege that I didn't know that I needed. You know what I'm saying? Just and ever since then we've connected, we've stayed in touch. I've done clinics here in San Antonio. He's come down for me. I mean, I love Les Thatcher to death. I mean, I can't imagine wrestling, even though a lot of the kids don't really appreciate what Les means to pro wrestling. I mean, I can't really imagine the wrestling business without Les being part of it.
And it's even
Wow.
coming through. It's even coming through the comments again. John Saxon says Les is the best teacher of a tag team wrestling I've ever seen. Another guy, Adrian Whisper says, "Nice to see you, young man. Last show I worked with Mr. Thatcher was in Vicksburg, Mississippi. 3/4 of the talent didn't get paid. Yeah, I don't know if you remember that at all.
You can't forget the ones you don't get paid for. Those are the big ones, right?
Scott, and even those comments, like people, will address me as Rudy Gonzalez or what have you, or Tom Pritchard or Gerald Briscoe, but a lot of kids address Les as Mister Thatcher,
Yeah,
and that's just the respect that he draws, man. It's
Right.
and like I said, it was a privilege to get in the ring with him. It's a privilege to call him my friend.
right.
It's a privilege to have him on the show with us.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's a privilege to be your friend, Rudy Gonzalez. And do I owe you money? He's sitting here putting me over like $1 million, and you mentioned the Les Thornton thing just recently. Well, I shouldn't say just recently. A couple of years ago, before my was 2023, I was inducted into the Tragos Thez Hall of Fame in Waterloo. And so Briscoe and JBL had me on their show. And so JBL's doing the intro, right? And he started like mentioning some of the stuff that you did, and like you did. But I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, how am I going to follow this? Because talking about, my drag racing and doing competitive bodybuilding and this and that and the other thing. And so he said, and so welcome to the show, Les Thornton. And Briscoe and I just cracked up. We lost our minds. But LT and LT, I said, although I don't have the British accent, I appreciate the compliment. Thank you, JBL. You're a good guy.
Wow. Yeah.
I saw Layfield last night at Ohio Valley.
What was going on in Ohio Valley last night? I know I saw Jody Hamilton. See, I'm screwing up. Jody Malenko was there too, right?
Yes, he was. Yeah, I met him for the first time also. Every year in January, Al has this thing called the Nightmare Rumble, Battle Royal, and he has one for the men and one for the women. And so they bring Micah up every year for the last 4 or 5 years,
Oh,
and
great.
they take care of her. I mean, they like her up there, and she likes going up there. We don't mind the drive. Maria Padilla is the one that books the females, And I mean, they take care of Micah, and of course, me and our daughter Ivy are, we're just along for the ride. So we get taken care of also. Um, and then we took, I don't know if you remember when you came down to the kid named Sabino Blaze.
I don't think so. No, go ahead.
Yeah, so he went with us, and so he did a dart match, and the fans they caught on to him, and they enjoyed the match and stuff. He got a lot of great responses from his social media stuff, whatever. So hopefully Al will like him enough to bring him back, or
Good. Excellent. That's great. And
yeah,
Alan those damn clubs now that he's screwing with, right?
yeah. I don't, he doesn't have him at least I didn't see him. He didn't have him at the arena, but I guess that's what he works out with. They
Yeah.
work.
So Rudy, this
And
one's
what I was going to mention now, when I was running the tours for WCW back in, what was it, 82 and 83 or whatever. No, yeah. Anyway, it don't matter. When I was, when WCW was touring Ohio, Michigan, and West Virginia, one of the things we were doing was, the Iron Sheik was on the roster then. And so with the Sheik, it was like, if you can do the clubs the same style, with the wrist action and everything that he did, you'll win $10,000. And the only time that I was really frightened about that is we were in Michigan, and we had some University of Michigan football players as security, right? So these 280, 300-pound guys, football players, and I thought, man, I'm going to cough up 10 grand of Barnett's money tonight. Sure, and the devil, nobody was able to do those things. I mean, they just couldn't. We almost had a hell of in Dayton, Ohio, at the old Hare Arena. There was a softball team that had, I guess after the game decided we're going to wrestling matches, and they'd had a few beers before they got there. And so the one guy challenged to do the clubs, and he got so frustrated, he threw the club down, and Ziv, Sheik, got said, and the softball team outside got on their feet, and somebody come back and said, "You guys better get out there." I thought, oh Christ, we can't be going to have a damn over this club, right? But yeah, we did the $10,000 challenge on the tours, and nobody could even get close to it's that. I watching Al doing those when I see him do them on Facebook or something. I'm thinking, what's going to happen to your wrist at some point? It's got to, put so much pressure on your
Right.
wrist to do those things. So
Right.
I don't. He's put on size. Al has gotten bigger too, has he not, Rudy?
Yeah. He looks good.
A lot thicker through here. Right?
He looks good though.
Oh yeah, he does. But so it's those us Ohio boys. What can I say? We age well or something. I don't know.
you're not an Ohio State fan, are you?
Yes. Oh, that's right. Damn, I'm talking to Texas here. You guys would remember Ohio State. Let me go get my baseball cap.
I'm a Michigan boy. I'm a Michigan fan.
Geez.
I know.
Oh my God.
We got to end the interview right now. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're done. Bang bang.
Bang bang. So, man, you've been in the business 66 years, you said?
Yeah, July 4th of this year will be 67 years. I was
Wow.
19 years old when I started. And unlike Mr. Gonzalez, 10 years ago, I was not in my 80s. I was in my 70s. But anyway, yeah. October of this year, I will be 86 years old.
So you're a wrestler, a booker, promoter, trainer, broadcaster. What role did that
magazine editor? Don't forget the magazine editor.
Magazine editor. So all of those, which role did you get more out of, or more? What one did you enjoy the best? What do you think was your career as people look back?
When I started at 19, like every other kid. I just want to be world champion. I just want to be a wrestler, right? The other stuff, came like by accident almost. Like I was in the right place at the right time. And well, let's start with the television. As a kid, like going back to the 50s, the disc jockeys of the 50s, right?
Yeah.
Had that great rap. And I always thought I wanted to be a disc jockey, like WKRP in Cincinnati, that's since Cincy was home, my hometown. But anyway, it's the craziest thing was Rudy Kay and he had been my partner when we were in Charlotte. And, when you run up down the road, you're talking about all kinds of things. And I had met Gordon Soley the first time I was in Tampa. When I was NWA Rookie of the Year in 1967.
Yeah.
And back then, your broadcasters are like a local talk show host, right? On the local station, a ladies show or a kiddie show or something. And they were offering these guys $50 to do the wrestling show. And most of the guys spent more time trying to get themselves over than they did wrestling, right? So the first time that I went to Tampa and heard Soley, I said, oh my God, he calls wrestling like to shoot, And he and I, well, speaking of the things I've done in my life, I was driving on drag strip when I was 15. Before I had a driver's license, I was driving race cars.
Wow.
And Gordon was into stock car, roundy round racing. So we hit it off as friends, initially in Tampa in 1967. And so I decided, I thought, boy, I'd like to do this maybe, after I get out of the business. So in talking to Rudy Kay about it when we run up down the roads in the Carolinas, he brought me into Eastern Canada in 1970. He was running a tour. He was running seasons up there. They'd open in April and then run until about mid-October and then shut down. So about halfway through the tour, he called. We lived in Moncton. Moncton was Monday night. Tuesday went to Halifax, and TV was done in Halifax on Wednesday morning. And so we're just shooting the breeze, and all of a sudden he said, "Remember when we were run up down the roads in the Carolinas, talking about this and that, and you talked about you'd like to be, do wrestling broadcasting?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, tomorrow when we go to Halifax, bring a suit and tie." I said, "Why?" His announcer had a death in the family and lived in Toronto, so he had to go back to Toronto. And then there was something to do with the family, closing things out for the person who had passed. So he was going to have to stay a while. So the first broadcasting I ever did, back then there was one guy, right? There was no teams. I'd been interviewed, but I had never sat down. I'd never opened a show, never, cued to a segment or anything. And that was the start of it. So I was only supposedly going to do a couple of weeks. And at the end of the second week, actually going into the third week, Rudy said, "Look," he said, "I'm just going to leave the guy in Toronto and I want you to finish out the season. We'll work it out on your money." Okay, good. So I finished out the season, went back to the States. I finished up in Tennessee before I went to Canada, went back to Tennessee and then back down to Florida and then up to the Carolinas again. Well, in Mr. Crockett's office one morning, and Lord Littlebrook, the midgets were in the territory, and Brooke was there. And Brooke said to Mr. Crockett, he said, "Why isn't Les on your TV?" And Mr. Crockett looked and said, "What do you mean he's on my?" No, he said, "I mean as a broadcaster." Mr. Crockett said, "I don't know what you mean." He said, "Well, he did Rudy's TV last summer in Maritimes and did a good job." So Mr. Crockett said, "Well, looked at me and said, you never told me." I said, "I never thought it was important because, I was 10 years into my wrestling career. So broadcasting, being a broadcaster, the last thing I was thinking about, so he decided to try me there. And how it started out was like with Bill Ward in Charlotte. he was a local guy, really nice guy. But like he'd be saying, "Happy 98th birthday to Miss Jody Smith" or something, maybe in the middle of a big spot or where they're shooting an angle on TV. So my job was to be sure that his voice pointed to the right thing instead of Miss Jody's birthday to the guy beating the hell out of the guy in the ring. That's how it started with broadcasting, and the magazines, the same thing with the editing magazines. I was looking at Crockett's used to have these print the books, with your picture and a small, story about you, where the fans could buy them and get you to autograph them. And I was looking at one of Mr. Crockett's office one day, and I said to him, "You don't do these anymore." He said, "Well, the guy that was doing them isn't here any longer or anything." I said, "That's a shame. Those are not." He said, "Well, why don't you try one?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I'll work a deal with you. You want to try and put the magazine together?" So from the little autograph books, we graduated to a 4-color magazine with an artist rendered covering, which nobody has done before or since. And then once Vince McMahon Jr. saw those, I did 5 issues for him of WWF wrestling action. So it was like, just being in the right place or somebody saying something. I didn't know if I could do magazines, but I was able, So it was just falling into something, basically. The training, I had moved back to since I was living here I was left here in 85, went back to Cincinnati. My dad had passed in 83 and went back to help my mom. And Bob Harmon, the original Beautiful Bobby, was a Cincinnati boy. And he called me and he said, "Hey, this guy has a wrestling school here, but he hired this idiot as a trainer. And he said he's going to lose all his kids if he doesn't get a competent trainer." And I said, "Well, why are you telling me all this?" He said, "Because you're the guy I think." I said, "Are you nuts? I don't want to be a trainer." It never crossed my mind at the time. So he made me go to my first independent wrestling show the following Saturday night. And I'm watching these 2 guys, and the promoter, the guy that was running the school, was with us, obviously. And we're watching. And so I see these 2 guys in the ring, and the one guy goes out and gets a chair. And I could tell the way he was holding the chair, he had no idea what to do with it, right? And so he nails his opponent and rung the guy's bell. I mean, the guy was wandering around in circles after the match. They had to help him out of the ring. He was goofy. And so I said to Bob, "Ask the promoter, how long has this guy used the chair, been working?" Because he didn't know what he was doing. And so Bob leans over to the guy and it comes back. He said, "He's had 6 classes." I said, "Jesus, 6 classes? He's hitting the guy with a chair? That's crazy." So I decided, okay, I'm going to try being a trainer. That's how that started, And so I just, just fell into all this stuff, not knowing if I could or couldn't do it. But I don't know. I didn't realize I had talent for some of it either until after I tried it. So, but I learned to do that as well. Then I meet guys like Rudy Gonzalez who put me over like $1 million, and I can't get rid of him, for God's sakes.
I know. He's always here. So you mentioned you were the NWA Rookie of the Year. You beat out talents like Terry Funk and Bobby Shane. What do you remember most about that time in your life when you got that award?
Wow. The thing that I had hooked up with 2 guys from Indiana, Roger Kirby and Dennis Hall. And we started as like cousins. So we were trying to put something together. That's another long story. But anyway, we were went into Atlanta as Kirby's partner. Then we went into Louisiana territory. This was back before Bill Watts had it. This is back when Lee Fields ran it out of Mobile. And we went in and we worked a deal with the Daltons, who was Donnie Fargo and Frank Dalton. And Kirby and I set a deal up with them. And then, spit it out, Les. I'm having a senior moment now. And so anyway, we worked this deal in Louisiana, and then they wanted us to go over to the Mobile territory. So we were over there, and they had a tag team tournament in Dothan, Alabama. And Lester Welch, Eddie Graham, and Sam Steamboat came in for that tournament. And I guess because we both were named Les, they put Lester Welch and I together as a team. This was on a Friday night in Dothan. And then Saturday, a spot show before they went back to Tampa. Lester and Eddie called me off to the side and said, we talked to Rocky McGuire, who was the booker in Louisiana at the time. And he said, he's okayed it. We want you to come into Tampa. We're going to make you the NWA Rookie of the Year. And I was godstruck. Because at that point in my career, I broke into business in 1960. So I was just been wrestling 6 years. But I would have never gone to Tampa without them asking me, because I'm thinking, that's where those guys that wrestle go. They're all down there. The shooters are all down there. I can't go down there. My first night in Tampa, I went in there on a Sunday, and pick up a newspaper, and my first opponent is going to be Don Curtis. And I'm as nervous as an old whore in church, right? Because I'd heard about Don Curtis's reputation, and I'd never worked with the guy. But so that Tuesday night at the Armory in Tampa, he came up to me and he said, I understand we're working together tonight. And I said, yes, sir. He said, anybody sitting in this chair? I said, no, sir. He sat down. And before we went to the ring, we had become friends, and we're that way until his passing, God rest his soul. But that was, how I got started down there. And then we rolled, then I just stayed in the Southeast for the rest of my career, basically, except for the run in Canada. But the Tampa thing was, we talk about a place to learn finishes and stuff. My God, Eddie Graham, he put together a finish that was 3 minutes, and you'd have to run it through you couldn't have put a whole show together, like these guys try to put a whole thing together today of a whole match and step by step. His finishes were so intricate, but it was, that's the great thing about the territories. Every time you change territory, it's like going to a new college, a new school, right? You're learning from new guys and veterans. It's a lot different than today. That's for daggone sure. And when my first match was July the 4th, 1960. And from that point forward, I was a wrestler. It wasn't like, you work the independents and hold a job at the grocery store and stuff like that. So in that respect, it was, once you got your foot in the door, it was easier to stay there than, and now it's like there's 9,000 kids on the indies, and 8,500 of them don't have a clue of how to work. And so, it's a whole different ballgame. And then, I felt blessed to work in the 60s and the 70s. To me, in my lifetime, that was kind of the golden age of professional wrestling. So many great workers. I've said before, everybody, when I got the Hall of Fame thing in Waterloo in 2023, I said, I probably should say thank you to every guy I ever locked up with, because I learned something, even if it was what not to do. I still learned something, right? And it was just a great time. Listen, I look back, guys say I wouldn't change a thing. I'd probably change 100 things, but the point is, I'm still living my dream. I'm 85 years old. I'm still doing what I love to do. So that's the great thing about it, I think.
Absolutely. So you've faced numerous people, had many tough matches. Who would you say is your toughest opponent and your favorite opponent to work with?
God, you know what? I wish I could answer that, because there's so many guys that are so smooth to work with, right? Mm-hmm. Some of the guys, well, Rudy probably tell you the same thing. There's some guys you just can't work with. You don't gel. It's like pulling teeth, for God's sakes. But then there's so many. Well, that's the thing today. I think Rudy will tell you too. These kids today want to, talk about every move and how to do it and when to do it and why to do it and if you do it. I couldn't do that if you held a gun to my head. I wouldn't know how. And that, to me, Dr. Tom, since my stroke, Rudy, Tom has been coming over and holding my hand. His wife's been cooking for me. Hell, I'm just going to stay in invalid for the rest of my life. I think they're taking such good care of me. But we sat here and talked a couple nights about, saying that the art of working is dead. And we said, and if we said that to a bunch of young kids, they say, oh, those guys are just jealous because they can't do all the cool bumps and everything, right? But I honestly believe, the art of working is because it was about everything. It wasn't just the moves or the finish. It was facial expressions and body language. And Tom and I have said several times over our relationship, we teach some things that were never taught to us. We were just expected to know them, to pick them up. And if you didn't know them, somebody popped you upside the head and you would catch on real quick after that. But it's a whole different time. But I feel blessed that from 1960 to current that I've been able to be a part of this great business.
So not only did you wrestle and all that stuff in the magazine, but I've read that you helped produce the first wrestling T-shirt, the Briscoe Booster.
First T-shirt.
Remember that?
Sure do. Sure. You know what I keep saying about that? I wish I could get 1% of the net gross of wrestling T-shirt sales today.
Yeah.
And I'd fly you guys up to my mansion.
I bet you would. 100%.
Yeah. Well, back in a T-shirt thing first started really back in the 60s with bands, and stuff like that. And I was just thinking, wow, why don't we have, well, of course, babyface, T-shirts for baby faces, not necessarily, for heels or anything, because kayfabe was still very much in vogue. So I had mentioned it to a couple promoters, and they didn't say it was a bad idea. They just weren't interested. Well, we promote wrestling and this and that. So anyway, one night, Jack and Jerry Briscoe and I were sitting around drinking a beer in Charlotte and just talking about one thing and another. And I was mentioning to them about my frustration. I said, I think this would really work. Just nobody will give it a shot. And Jack said, why don't we do it? I said, what? He said, why don't three of us, start with T-shirts? So that's how it all began. And you can still get a copy of that first T-shirt at Pro Wrestling Tees. It's Briscoe Booster shirt. A guy named Jerry Lawler did the artwork on that for $25. I wish I had the original artwork. Probably sell it for $1,000 today.
Yeah,
right? Lawler did the drawing. But that's another one of my things that I got hooked in. But like I say, if some way or another we could have, I keep telling Jerry Briscoe, I said, if we could have got just a piece of the action of all the pro wrestling T-shirts, we wouldn't have to work another day in our lives, for God's sake.
So now you were the founder of Heartland Wrestling Association, and you developed and trained people like John Moxley, Adam Cole, Nigel McGuinness. What philosophy did you teach those guys that was different from the WCW power plant?
I don't know. Well, I think Rudy would say the same thing. As a trainer, if you're going to be a good trainer, you have to have your own system. You can't use somebody else's system because not only is it your physical work, but your personality and the way you deal with your students is a big part of it as well. So I don't know that there is any standardized way, Okay. Harley Race and Ricky Steamboat and I have a manual. Well, it's out of print now. They're selling them on. I saw this one of our old training books for $400 on Amazon a number of years ago. And I thought, God, I wish I had a couple of cases of those suckers to sell them again, you know. But it's, well, you know, you mentioned John Saxon. And I mentioned, you know, I look back and I had actually been a trainer without thinking of being a trainer because some young guys that I had mentored as they came up in the business. Terry Taylor, for one, came here to Knoxville just as a rookie, you know, and I worked with him and guys like that. So Saxton mentioned the tag team thing. I have a tag team drill, which I've never shown to Rudy, I don't think either. It's called the hot tag drill. I won't go ahead and try to explain it to you now, but Rudy, I'll explain that to you at some point, and you can give it a shot. But, you know, to me, it's, I guess my personality is that I find something that I like or I'm interested in or I have a passion for, and then I start thinking, well, how can you make this better? You know, how can you expand this? You know, it's, well, like sit down interviews. Here, we did when Ron Fuller bought Knoxville territory in 1974, I was in the Carolinas and he called me. He said, I'm buying Knoxville. Of course, I'd already been one of the top baby faces here in the town, in the territory. And so anyway, he said, Ron said, I want you to produce my television. He said, I don't know anything about it. He said, build me a show, but don't get too crazy. Well, the one thing I stuck in the show was the thing I called personality profile. And it was about a background of the wrestlers because my point was in watching other things, well, like NASCAR. If you have a favorite NASCAR driver and he races a Chevrolet, chances are you drive a Chevrolet, right? You asked me about Ohio State. I'm not necessarily a Texans NFL fan, but a guy named Stroud who quarterbacked Ohio State is a quarterback there. So I have an interest there. I have a connection there. Houston. So to me, the personality profile thing that I wanted to do was it was a sit down, low key, 5-minute pre-taped segment, like a magazine show, right? Only we stuck it in the middle of the wrestling program. And when I first wrote and put this all together, I'm bouncing it off of some of the older guys in the business, you know, and you can't do that. Why? Well, of course, for those listening to us, back then a wrestling show was only 1 hour long. But their idea was, well, you put that in the middle of a show, you'll kill whatever heat you built in the first part of the show, then you have to start all over again. But that wasn't, you know, but we proved later that wasn't the case. But so we started doing that personality profile here in Knoxville. And back then, nobody was doing anything like, you know, a low key thing. And then we also worked angles, you know, like you could have video at 5 minutes with, say, you two guys are working a big angle. And I sit down with do 2 minutes of one of you, 2 minutes of the other, and show film behind you and that sort of thing. And it was just something that had never happened in wrestling before. Of course, now sit down low key interviews are okay now. Everybody does them. Right. So, you know, that's the other thing. Dr. Tom and I were sitting here the other night thinking, how many things are our fingerprints on in this business that nobody will ever know, you know, 100 years from now, because it's just not that important, but it still has been a part of the industry and a pretty damn big part for that matter, you know?
Absolutely. So speaking of John Saxon, he asked me to ask you this. Please ask Les if he's going to attend Sigmund's Christian Weekend for wrestlers. Hope I can see him there this time.
If I'm going to what?
I guess attend Sigmund's Christian Weekend for wrestlers. Hope I can see him there this time.
I don't know. I don't have a clue what he's talking about. What's he asking? What he's drinking?
What are you drinking, Johnny boy? What are you drinking? What would one big point that if you could talk to these young bucks that are in the business, what would one big piece of advice would you give them as they're going through?
I think it today. Well, I won't start and tell you all the little things I would change in the business today. We'll be here for another hour and a half if I did that. But I think today, because everything is so compartmentalized and so laid out, that they're forgetting a lot of little detailed things that make the big things work. You know, facial expressions, body language, timing. I know Rudy must see this, and it drives me crazy. I bet it drives him crazy too. Is to see some guy standing in the middle of the ring, bent at the waist, looking out of the corner of his eye, waiting for some guy to climb. You know, and I was thinking, what the hell are you standing there for? Right?
Yep.
They do not know how to improvise because everything is laid out, and they don't understand how to put something together on the fly. But that's something that I always taught. When you left HWA, you knew how to call a match on the fly. And I think today, you know, I try to tell these kids, I said, look, you know, if a promoter's paying you big money to lay it all out in the back, do that. But we're all humans, and humans make mistakes. And if you blow one of the spots that you've laid out in the back, you've got to find a way. Well, let's put it this way. Rudy and I are having a match. Rudy and I are going 15 minutes, and he's going over with some elaborate thing off the top, right? And 5 minutes into that 15-minute match, he pulls a hamstring. Not bad enough that we got to stop, but bad enough we got to work around it. And he's not going to climb to the top for that finish. We got to be able to change that finish while we're in there. We can't call timeout. Ladies and gentlemen, let us go to the back and talk another 45 minutes to get a new finish, and we'll come back and fill you in, right? It don't work that way. And that's the biggest thing, I think, is the guys, they don't know how to put something together on the fly. And I think that's, Rudy, do you sit and watch any of the shows on TV? And does that drive you crazy when you see guys that you know they've missed a spot and they don't have a clue what to do?
What drives me nuts is there's just no selling. They're trying to fit, you know, they give the kids, you know, 5, 6, 7 minutes for a match, and those kids try to fit, you know, 20 pounds of shit in a 5-gallon bucket. You know, there's no selling, and half the time, like we did this at my place, we the kids wanted to do a headlock, you know, like we did, tackle, drop down, headlock, takeover, and they were trying to do it so fast, everything was just a mess. The footwork, the bumps, grabbing the head, everything was just trash. And we did it 3, 4, 5 times, and finally I'm like, stop, you know, because it gets frustrating. And you know, I had to actually walk them through it. One guy got a headlock, and I'm like, all right, shoot him off the ropes, give him a tackle, stop. Hit the other rope, step over the guy, stop. You know, it's that's my main. I think I try and once they can figure out to slow their stuff down, then we'll go on to other stuff. But it's just so hard getting them to slow down, man, and then to sell, and you know, they take a big bump for, you know, suplex, and they get right back up.
Yeah.
And you know, and they get up for the next move, and there's no, you know, I know when I did it when I was younger, I got chewed out by Chavo or Slater or Tully or Eric Embry or whoever was in the ring with me. They would chew me out. Get up, hold your back. What are you doing? You think you're Superman? You know, and stuff like that.
Sure.
And you know, and it made sense. You know, it's part of the storytelling. You know.
Yeah. Well, you know, here's something I mentioned to young guys today. And I say, I said, pick a movie that you've seen more than once. There's a reason that you've seen it more than once, right? The actors become the character that they're playing in the movie. The storyline is heavy and it draws you in. Or let's look at Law and Order on television, 27 years. There's a reason for that. It's because they draw you in that hour, right? And
Right.
I said, we've got to do the same thing. You know, we're just a walking, talking book or movie or whatever. It's just that I think that's one of the things too, Rudy, that we young guys today, I think it's harder to teach today. Tom and I talk about this all the time because everybody knows it's a work, it's a show. And when I got on a Greyhound bus in 1960 to go to Boston to learn the business, I thought it was a shoot. I didn't know what the hell I was looking forward in Boston, but I was, I wanted to be a wrestler.
Right.
And and my training in Boston went from February of 1960 to July the 4th when I had my first match. And I tell the kids today when I work with them, and somebody will say, when did they smarten you up? I said, July the 4th, when I had my first match, the morning of my first match. What did you do before then? I said, well, I got my ass handed to me a few times. That's for damn sure. Right. But, and again, I don't recommend you beat the hell out of kids and teach them the business. But I think it's just we learned respect back then of the industry and of the guys around us. And one of the stories too, Rudy, that I tell kids too, when they're so busy, well, yourself, you lock up with some kid, I'll step back and say, anybody mention to you this is a work? What do you mean? I said, I've been in street fights easier than this, right? Relax, loosen up. But I've worked with Danny Hodge, I've worked with Harley, some real tough SOBs, and I didn't know they were there. You don't feel them.
Right.
And when I broke into business, to those tough old suckers, it was more about not hurting one another than it was anything else, right? And that the kids today don't. Recently, Regal did a story about the neck injuries, right? You read that, and then Arn was talking about how he feared for the young wrestlers' lives, and I agree, but that's something too. We were talking about that on our podcast the other day. Rudy will come up with a new spot, and I'll think, man, that's great. I'm going to try to steal that. So I'm doing. So pretty soon, 15 guys are doing it, and around the country, and then all of a sudden it becomes a high spot, and then it becomes everybody's doing it, and it doesn't mean anything anymore. Right. Now, in the Carolinas, especially because I worked that territory, I don't know, 4 or 5 times over my career. Like they had 50 guys on a roster usually, but if you went in there and what's your finish? Oh, I do a sleeper. Not here, you don't. Johnny Weaver does a sleeper here. In other words, one finish to one wrestler, not 16 wrestlers, and 16 wrestlers couldn't use it for a high spot. That way, when Johnny Weaver put the sleeper on, the folks started putting their coats on to go home because that was the finish.
Yep.
And that's today. There's not any structure. It's just do everything and do it 15 times. Well, like, I don't care if I ever see another table broken. I don't care if I ever see another dive, because there is no sense in either one of them if you get right down to it.
Right.
But a dive before, wow, but now when you see 10 in the same show, it's one of the things I'll ask students. I'll say, how many of you guys got live-in girlfriends or wives? They're holding. Okay, I said, tell me something. Do you remember the first time you saw her with no clothes on? Don't bother to answer me because I know the answer. Yes, you do. Do you remember the 300th time? I know the answer to that too. No, you do not. Why? Because it's become commonplace. It's become, regular. I mean, right. You love her just as much. It's just, but you don't even have to think about it. Right. That's right. The problem today. You're seeing the same finish 17,000 times, or the same moves in the same matches on the same show. We were talking about Tom and I were talking about this the other day. I think the guys need to stop and think, okay, we're in Barcelona tonight, we're in Chicago tomorrow, we're in Perth, Australia the week after that, but you're on my TV every Monday night.
Correct.
So if I see it 10 times this Monday and 10 times next Monday, and it's not like the territory days. You got to look the structure and make it fit in today's time.
Yeah.
And it's just, well, you know, it's like back in my day, you might have said, who does the best abdominal stretch? And, you know, you might have had 3 guys or 4 or 5. Today, everybody does an abdominal stretch, or everybody does a pile. You know, it's a spot. You know,
Yep.
back 60 years ago, I could win a match with 2 drop kicks. Not today. You can't do that. You know?
I think the kids are pushing the envelope so much. You can only push it so far, you know.
Right.
I mean, I think I see what you're saying because, and don't get me wrong by what I say this, I loved John Cena's last match. Okay. But I didn't need to see Gunther put him in a sleeper hold 5 times. 5 times in that match was a sleeper hold. And I was like, why do I need to see? That was my frustration about that one. I mean, John went out the way he wanted to go out. He knew what he was going to do. He knew the ending. He knew it. Even with a smile on his face. That didn't bother me at all. But what I had to go through is see Gunther put him in 5 sleeper holds.
You know what drove me crazy about that was we were talking about it on our show. I was laughing. I said, you know, kids say, well, people don't believe it anymore. Now everybody's crazy because John got tapped out, right?
Yeah.
It's not real. But the point is, movies aren't real. TV series aren't real.
Right.
Novels, you know, mystery novels that you read in paperback, they're not real either. But they draw you in because the writers or the producers have made the characters rich and the stories are compelling.
Yep.
And that's the bottom line, I think. You know, it's not all this elaborate nonsense. You know, I've got a friend that grew up in Memphis on Memphis wrestling. He's in his 50s. He comes over and watches with me. And like now he goes crazy. Wow, 6-minute entrance in a 2-minute match. What the hell is that? Right?
Yeah.
I can't argue with him. It
No.
it makes no sense. It doesn't.
No. So when John Moxley came through your school, did you see that did you know then that he'd be as big as he is now?
No, you know, John, when I first saw John, I'd already sold my school, right? So I didn't, but I was still helping him out. And he was with another kid, and they were like ex-football, high school football players or something. That was their gimmick. And but he grew into, well, like now, you know, people say, well, doing all the blood and this. I said, that's what he loves.
Mm-hmm.
That's him, you know. When he was with CZW in Philadelphia, I said, why the hell are you doing? He said, oh, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Okay, cool. Now, I didn't see the match he had for Fletcher, but they tell me that was one hell of a match. And I said, good. That means Mox has gotten off his ass and quits the 90 punches with each other matches that they were doing for so long. That's the other thing that drives me crazy. Rudy and I stand in the middle of the ring and throw 20 punches, and neither one of us goes down.
Right.
Well, I don't have to be a wrestler to know neither one of us can punch worth a damn. Right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We underdo some things now and overdo others. That's the biggest problem, I think. There is no structure in as much as, well, everybody. Well, and that's the other thing too, Rudy. How many kids do you have talk to you and say, well, everybody's smart? My answer to that is, you're not very smart for saying that, because no, they're not.
Exactly.
You know, it's like all of us, the 4 of us talking right now, watch college and pro football, I'm sure, right? Well, you guys in Texas, you have to watch it. You get up in the morning, you eat football for breakfast, right? For God's sakes. But you know, but it's still, well, you know, I was, Dr. Tom and I were teasing about this. NFL this year has had so many tight finishes, right? Field goal with 30 seconds on the clock. And I said, who's booking this? Who's calling the spots here? Right. Now, tell me the truth, you guys. You both watch the NFL, I know.
Yep.
But it's been better this year than in previous years. because of these hot finishes toward the end, right? You
Yep.
can't figure out, well, who would have expected North Carolina to be in the playoffs? Nobody. Nobody thought the Patriots would be there this year. Nobody thought the Bears would be there. And all of a sudden they're all there, right?
Well, yep.
Yep.
Hey, I got a question, Les. When and how did the Heartland Wrestling developmental program come about?
I was first approached by WWF. Bruce Pritchard came to Cincy, and I had supplied them when they came into town a few times with talent, and the guys did good jobs for them and everything. So anyway, Bruce came to town, and we sat and talked about it, worked out numbers and this and that, and I was waiting to hear something. And waiting, and I mean, was expected, to pull the trigger and to start as a developmental with WWF. And then Gary Juster called me one day from WCW and said, listen, I got a question. I said, what? Have you signed with WWF yet? And I said, how did you know I was supposed to sign with them? He said, well, that's why I'm doing it. That's why I'm calling. Did you sign? I said, no. Well, don't until you talk to us. So they flew me down to Atlanta the following Friday and made me an offer I could not refuse. So that's how I started, was with WCW. Mm. And then, of course.
Was this before the power plant?
No, the power plant was there at the time. Paul Orndorff was, they had the power plant at the time. Yeah.
Okay.
They were just trying to expand it, right? And so they signed me to a good deal, but the problem, what I didn't know, is they were rupturing money themselves, right? Their business was slowly sinking in the West, for God's sake. And so, but that's how I first got on board. And then when, they pulled the trigger and started to shut down, I got a call from JR and said, hey, Memphis is on a short leash right now. They're not doing what we expected, and there's a good chance we're going to close them down or pull the sanction. So don't go anywhere. So that's how I got hooked up with WWF.
Wow.
But I'll tell you, that was a hell of a crew. You could have taken my cruiserweights out of HWA and put them in Raw or SmackDown, and they would not have missed a beat. Boy, you mentioned Nigel, but Jamie Noble, Kaz Hayashi, Shannon Moore. Man, I had a hell of a cruiserweight crew. I did. That was a good time for us. It was. I'm not crazy about 3-ways or four corner tags and nonsense like that, but I had to book shows like that because I had 35 guys that were all talented workers, and I needed to get them all out there, right?
Right.
But that was a hell of a crew of guys. That was so much fun, and working with guys and I was just sitting here thinking, what we did in Jersey at Monster Factor, Rudy, was we ended up against the ropes. You threw the one punch, I blocked the second one, I caught you, you staggered back, I hooked the headlock and took you over.
There you go. Yep.
That was what we did. See, not a bad old memory for an 85-year-old guy, right?
See, Rudy didn't want to mention that, right? he didn't want to mention that he got his ass kicked by the older man.
Wow, that's
all I know is I was the only one that took a bump, and I didn't mind. I didn't when I took that bump and I picked my head up and I looked around, every kid in that place was staring at us. There was a guy walking on the camera. He had the camera. I don't know what happened to that footage, but I'm sure Danny probably has it. But I mean, it was just one of those moments. It's all the guys talk about creating moments now, and that's the other thing is we just back when I started and stuff, we just wanted to have matches, and we just sell tickets and stuff. But now a lot of kids they talk about, you got to create this moment. You got to create a moment. You got to, and it's like the moments will just happen. I mean, I don't believe in, being, that the reaction that we got from that training session, I didn't plan it and Les didn't plan it. It just happened. And to me, and that's what made it even more special was it just happened.
Yeah.
And to me, what makes those moments happen is, or what makes them special is that it's just something that happens. It's organic. I don't think I mean, you can, I guess, you do this, I'm going to do this, you're going to do this, I'm going to do this, and then everybody's going to be shocked,
Right.
um, but I feel like if you do your job, you put together your matches, you do your part, and the other guy does his part, and we all work together and stuff. The moments will just happen on their own,
Yeah.
you know. Um,
Well, I'll tell you, you were talking in 19 when I first went to Atlanta in 1966. They put Kirby and I. That's where we started the cousins thing. Leo Garibaldi was the booker, and excuse me. So my first Friday night in the old Atlanta auditorium, it was Kirby and I against this heel tag team. And Leo told me, he said, now look, it's your first night here. I don't want you to think I'm going to start beating you because I'm not. But these guys are going to be my top heel team for a long time. I need to get them over. I'm just starting to push them now. Okay, cool. And now, I don't know, you ever work with Garibaldi as a booker?
no, I didn't.
Okay. Well, he refereed too, you know. And so anyway, Kirby and I were supposed to put these guys over. So Leo was refereeing our match. And it was one of those nights you couldn't have made a mistake if you'd actually tried, right? We had old Atlanta auditorium rocking. Now, I don't know if Kirby had ever worked with these guys before or not, but I had never even met them, never heard of them. And we just had that building going crazy. Leo was refereeing our match. And in the middle of the match, we were supposed to put the heels over. In the middle of the match, he said, we're not wasting this. We're going to change the finish. And we changed the finish on the fly. And Kirby and I got our hands raised to come back to the return the following week. And I tell that story to his training class. I say, how many of you guys could have changed finish on the fly? They sit there and go, oh, right? They don't have a clue. I mean, but that was Garibaldi. And the heel tag team that we were working with were named Gene and Lars Anderson.
Wow.
That was the start of the push of the original Anderson team.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just had a brain fart. I was gonna when you started the Brian Pillman shows. Where what obviously the past of Brian was what inspired it, but what? Well, I guess the question is what what inspired you to do that? What got the ball rolling on that?
Well, the idea was, well, he was a local boy, Cincinnati, right? Played for the Bengals. And I just thought, let's do something to honor him. Let's have a small show. That was do one show only and have a show, right?
Right.
And so well, of course, and we had Benoit and Chris Jericho was our main event. Steve Austin came and signed autographs, and ended up I had talent from ECW, WCW, and WWF, the three top companies in the country. And this Norwood was the little subdivision in the middle of Cincinnati where Brian grew up, right? Went to school. And we got our first show there at the junior high school gym. And we turned away 300 or 400 people. We were as surprised as everybody else. And it just grew from that, Here's the crazy thing, like year 2, 3, and 4, I had guys pissed off at me because I couldn't put them on the show. I don't have room, guys, right? I had independent guys offer to pay me to be on the Pillman show. And
Wow.
I said, no, it don't work that way, guys. It don't work that way. Those, I tell you, I'm so proud of those shows. We raised $120,000 over 4 shows.
Wow.
And they were all special to me. They all were very, we've got the Pillman Anthology. All 4 of those shows on tape now. You can get them at wrestlinglibrary.com. And it's got all the shows. Plus, we got a lot of interviews of the guys that were on the shows and stuff like that. But to check it out. But yeah, those shows were special, man. They really were.
Did you get? You mentioned because I remember you had guys from WCW, you had WWE guys or WWF guys. How and then I mean, you had guys from everywhere. How difficult was that? I mean, were there any? Did you get any? Did you get any political? You can't put this guy over my guy, and stuff like that.
No,
Right?
never did. And I felt good about that, Rudy, because that meant they trusted me, that I
Right.
wasn't going to screw up, because I had all 3 of the major companies, supplying
Right.
talent. And yeah, it was, those shows were so, well, of course, Benoit and Regal was in the 3rd Pillman show. And have you seen that one?
Oh,
Huge
many
pop.
times, yeah.
Oh, I know you have. Have you
I have not.
seen it?
I have not.
No?
No. I have to check it out.
Rudy, you make sure he sees that match.
I will.
Chris Benoit and Steven Regal.
Okay.
Regal. These now on that same show, I had Eddie Guerrero. My God, we had top talent from all the companies, right?
Yep.
They went out there and they stole the freaking show. I mean, stole it, man. And it was a wrestling match. The boys could hear the match. The dressing rooms were in the basement. We were at Schmidt Fieldhouse at Xavier University, and I was sitting with the announcers, and I could feel that they're getting ready. When this thing pops, it's going to go crazy. The guys could hear it down the stairs starting to build, and they were coming upstairs, pushing each other out of the way to get a good spot to watch the damn match. Dr. Tom says the same thing that I do. I get goosebumps when I think about that damn match, because realize we had some of the top talent in the business on that show, and these guys stole the friggin' show. They would have been the main event, but Chris came to me and said Nancy was sick. He called home. He said, "Can you get me on a little early? I can get an earlier flight out." I said, "Yeah, I can get you on." And so they went on early. I'll tell you a funny story about that. That was the 3rd of the 4 Pillman shows. And on that same show, Just Incredible and Raven represented ECW, and they had a match and got blood. And Paul Lee lost his mind when he saw it, because he was, that was something he was going to build on ECW. And he got, he chewed him out. And he said, "Why the hell did you do that in a benefit show?" And Raven said, "You should have tried to follow Benoit and Regal."
Wow.
You would have done the same.
That's awesome. Send me that link, man. Send me the link, Rudy, for that.
The Regal Benoit match, like John Saxon just messaged me. I mean, people still talk about it. They still talk about it.
Send me that link, man. Rudy, send me that link. So my question, probably close to my last question, because Rudy, I was going to bring up the Brian Pillman Memorial. You say back in the podcast, being in the right place at the right time. I know you're a co-host on a podcast, of Wrestling Weekly podcast.
Right.
First question is, what generates the most discussion topics on your show, and what advice would you give me as a podcast 3 years in the business? What advice would you give me to put me to the next level?
Wow. There's so many podcasts. You know what? I'm not sure, because I'm still a beginner in a way too. Now we're expanding. We've been on the Observer site for 12 years. Vic, my partner, and I. But now we're also on YouTube on Fridays. Doc Young's Pro Wrestling Weekly is the name of the show.
Doc Young.
And we're just starting to build to where, and I've got some ideas which I won't share with you because I don't want you to steal them, for God's sakes. But yeah, well, that, what you're saying too is we're looking at, when we talked about expanding and going to YouTube. I said we got to do something a little different. So I've got some ideas on some stuff, and but I think the main thing is to get into the nuts and bolts of wrestling.
Okay.
We've got a fan base who think they're smart and they're not.
Yep.
So let's smarten them up. I mean, have you guys seen Unreal on Netflix?
Yes.
I have.
I've only gotten through 2 episodes. I haven't gotten through all 5 yet. But I'm surprised that so many young guys are mad about that show and don't want it on. Guys who expose the business every time they lock up with somebody else.
I think it's because fans understand pro wrestling better than the wrestlers themselves, and I mean, I thought this years ago. When I was younger, my job was to ring the bell for the matches. So the matches started at 7:30. I was at the table at 7:15 with the hammer in my hand, ready to go. And I could always hear the fans talking about the matches and whatever angles we had going on and stuff. And it never failed though. I always heard somebody say, there was a bar here in San Antonio. There was a place called the Wrestlathon that the guys would wrestle at, and then there was a municipal auditorium. But there was a bar called the Red Lion or something like that, and the wrestlers would go have a couple of drinks there and hang out and stuff like that. And on occasion, you would see Wahoo, who is the big baby face here, sitting there having a drink with Pork Chop Cash or somebody. Every now and then you'd catch one of the good guys sitting with one of the bad guys, and
Right.
you could. I could hear the fans. Oh, I saw Wahoo McDaniel having a beer with Tully Blanchard at the Red Lion, and well, they can only fight when during the matches, but they have to go under that law that says that they can't fight in the street, otherwise they'll get arrested. So fans would make up their own scenarios to make this stuff work.
Right.
And but I mean, they knew they just. I really feel like fans know what we do. They just want to spend that hour that 2.5 hours, 3 hours, and to just let these guys take me into another world, into somewhere else other than listening to my wife,
Yeah.
screaming, or I don't have to worry about the bills. I don't have to worry about my boss. I don't have to worry about work. I don't have to worry about, whatever troubles I have. I'll just watch these two guys beat the shit out of each other and yell and scream and holler and boo and all that other stuff. So I think they know what it's about. They don't care. They just want to be entertained.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It's but yeah, well, about understanding the business. It's like we all 3 of us watch pro football, but unless we've played it at that level, we can't really understand it the way the players understand it.
Right. Right.
We think we do. We talk about it, but we don't. The intricacies that they go through to get ready for that game is beyond us. We have never been in that same situation. And I think that's with wrestling fans as well.
Right.
They don't know. They don't have a friggin' clue. It's crazy. But and of course, that's what is when when Vince killed kayfabe. That's what happened too. I thought at that point, well, now if we can talk about it, we can make people understand how difficult it is. But I'm not sure you've been able to make all the wrestlers understand how difficult it is sometimes.
So, what's the name of that podcast what's the name of the YouTube channel?
We're on Fridays, and it's Doc Young's Wrestling Weekly.
Wrestling Weekly. All right.
Yeah. Doc Young is the guy. First podcast I ever did, I did with Doc back in 2004.
I'm gonna look you guys up and subscribe to you guys, man.
Yeah. And he was such a good guy, a Mark, but so we named it. And he put Vic and I together over a dozen years ago. And so we named, after Doc passed away, we named it after him. So, yeah.
So my last question I got for you. So looking back over the 66 years in the business, what's left on Les Thatcher's bucket list?
What's what?
Left on your bucket list of things to do in the business.
What's next?
What's left? What do you got left that you want to do?
I'm not sure what I want to, I've said this before too. Back in the territory days, I would have been either in the Charlotte office, the Atlanta office, or the Knoxville office, because I worked in all three of those offices at one point in time anyway. And I would still be a full-time employee in the professional wrestling business. But territories aren't around anymore. So I'm kind of at loose ends. I'd love to do something full-time, if I can make a living at it. I just don't see it happening now for some reason. And and the other thing about that too, like I mentioned earlier, Tom and I were mentioning, would anybody even remember who the hell we were 50 years from now? Although we'd given so much of ourselves to the business, and our fingerprints were on a lot of the stuff. So, but does it really matter? It's a shame. Yeah. Well, Cena mentioned too. He said a couple of years later, nobody will remember me, or something like that, which is a shame, quite frankly, but it's the way it is,
100%. Well, Rudy, if you have nothing left, I want to say thank you to Les Thatcher for coming on the show. It's been a great hour and 17 minutes listening to your stories and the knowledge that you have. And you inspired me. You said something in the show that you were in the right place at the right time. That gives me hope. I feel like we're going places. I said about 4 months ago, I hooked up with Rudy Gonzalez here, and I have nothing bad to say about Rudy. He's inspired.
Go ahead, please. Just tell me how stiff you think he is. That's what I didn't say either, right?
Right. No, what I can say about Rudy is he's honest.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to rub any shoulders or anything like that, but there was a time and I'm going to just postpone it. And Rudy says to me, we got to be consistent. If we want to make this podcast big, one thing he said, and he's smiling because he knows he's right. You have to be consistent. And that's the goal for 2026 for Rudy and I's show, is be consistent, and he said this, he said, be consistent and the people will come.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
right.
I got one more thing. Les, John says to tell Les, I sure miss seeing him. I'll tune into this YouTube show. So.
Well, you know what? It's been fun being with you guys. And let me say this about my friend, Rudy Gonzalez. I love him too. He's my buddy. He's my brother of the road. He's one of the best damn trainers in the business. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Oh, and Rudy, tell Micah, thank you so much for the plug on Facebook the other day. Did you see what she put?
Yeah, Micah thinks very highly of you, Les. When I told her about your medical episode, she got very concerned. I mean, we think the world of you, Les. I think the world of you, and Micah follows my lead, and she thinks the world of you. And we were when we went to Al's place over the weekend. I really wanted to stop. Knoxville's not that far from. I mean, it was kind of like off out of the way, but I didn't care. I would. We were just.
Yeah, I'd love to have you guys come by.
Yeah, we're gonna make a trip up there during the summer or something, and just to say, just for the day, or something. Just, I really miss seeing you.
I miss seeing you too, my brother. I love you, man. And this podcast guy, you make sure he takes care of those 8 children. Okay.
Man, Scott's always, am I doing this right? What do I need to do to get better? And I'm like, we're fine, man. Just keep doing what we're doing. It's not going to happen in a day. It's going to take a while. But I mean, Scott's, he asked some good questions, and he's a good dude. I wouldn't be doing this if he wasn't.
I want to apologize for last week.
That's all right. No big deal.
That's
Scott, you were cursing him out, man. You were cursing him out.
I was not. Let the old man sleep. I mean, if
you said, where is this old bastard? That's what you told me.
One of the side effects of me and that damn stroke. Seriously, my balance, and it's people say you look the same, you don't sound any different. I said, but internally, that is, it's really screwed with me. My balance and my peripheral vision and this and that. Yeah, still got doctors I've got to see for tests and stuff like that. But
that's why I messaged you when you didn't come on, and I sent you a text message and stuff, and there was no answer. So I'm like, I was thinking, oh shit, I hope nothing. Happened. Damn,
we
were all concerned, man. When you didn't show up, we're like, oh crap.
You know what, Rudy? Let me tell you what Rudy said. I said, geez, well, you're old. He said, and I thought, damn, you think?
Rude.
You really think I'm old?
That's rude. No. But man, I will say this, Les. It's been a joy. It's been a pleasure meeting you. I hope we can call each other friends. I feel like I can say that to you. Hey man, you might get a random email saying, "Hey, how you doing, man? Just checking in on you."
That's cool, and I consider you a friend as well. If you hang out with this goofy guy Gonzalez here, you're all right with in my book too.
Well, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate
Rudy,
that.
I love you, my brother. You take care
of
of yourself,
Les.
Okay? Tell
yes,
Miss
sir.
Micah, give Miss Micah my best too, please. Okay?
I will. She's running the gym right now while I'm doing this, so she'll be home in a little bit.
So,
all right.
Well, Les, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. And I'm going to close you out.
You guys. God bless you both. Take care. And let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Close out. Hey, if you have 2 seconds, let me play the music and I'll say goodbye off camera, okay?
All right, cool.
This has been Huge Pop Entertainment. My boy, Rudy Boy Gonzalez, myself, Huge Pop, Les Thatcher. We love the stories. Yeah, man, everybody, thank you for going on Huge Pop Entertainment. Check us on YouTube. Check us on Facebook. Check Les Thatcher on his Doc Young Wrestling Weekly on YouTube as well. And thank you guys. Just remember, we're Huge Pop, and we love you guys. Thank you so much.